Absolutely.
Without objection, 2-minute voting will continue. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on amendment number 232, printed in the congressional record, offered by the gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by a voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 232, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. Nadler of New York.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
Well, after 4 days of debates and voting, we've heard Majority Leader Cantor making the point that 103 amendments remain to be debated, looking to finish up federal spending tonight. Congress will be out next week for the President's Day break, and last night members agreed by unanimous consent to limit debate on the remaining amendments, giving them each 10 minutes of debate with the exception of a few of the more controversial amendments. Right now, vote on the Nadler of New York amendment, which would limit funds for military operations in Afghanistan to $10 billion. Again, 2-minute voting in the House.
This vote, the yeas are 98, the nays are 331. This amendment is The amendment is not agreed to. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on amendment number 214, printed in the congressional record, offered by the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Klein, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the ayes prevailed by a voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 214, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. Klein of Minnesota.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
Members continuing their votes on federal funding for this budget year with an amendment that would prohibit funds to implement, administer, or enforce the final regulations on the gainful employment regulation. Temporary funding for the federal government runs out on March 4th, and when the House finally does finish with the CR, they still need to send that legislation over to the Senate for their approval. From Politico this afternoon, an aide to House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi is indicating that a government shutdown is likely. A high-ranking aide to Nancy Pelosi told Democratic chiefs of staff that a government shutdown is more likely than not, according to attendees. Speaking at a regular meeting of the top aides to House Democrats, her floor director, Jerry Hartz, offered up unprompted his assessment that the odds favor inaction before the government runs out of money. That from Politico this afternoon, an article written by Jonathan Allen.
This vote is, the yeas are 289, the nays are 136, one member voting present. This amendment is agreed to. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on amendment number 11, printed in the congressional record, offered by the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Pence, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 11, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. Pence of Indiana.
Recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
So the fourth of 14 votes in this series as members continue their votes on federal funding for this budget year. This amendment brought by Congressman Pence of Indiana would prohibit any funds in the bill from being used by Planned Parenthood Federation of America. Congressman Pence has been very outspoken on this issue. From Politico a couple of days ago, nobody hates Planned Parenthood quite as much as Mike Pence. The Indiana Republican is a one-man crusade to deny all federal funding to the group, not just the money it gets for reproductive health and family planning services, but every penny it gets for anything. Quote, if Planned Parenthood wants to be involved in providing counseling services and HIV testing, they ought not to be in the business of providing abortions. That from Mr. Pence and from Politico on Tuesday in an interview.
The vote are the yeas 240, the nays 185, one member voting present. The amendment is agreed to. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on amendment number 533 printed in the congressional record offered by the gentleman from Alaska, Mr. Young, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the ayes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 533, printed in the congressional record offered by Mr. Young of Alaska.
Recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having arisen and a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
As voting continues on the House floor, this from the Associated Press today. Senator Jeff Bingaman, Democrat of New Mexico, intends to retire at the end of his term. His office announced today the latest in a string of departures to hit the Democrats as they look ahead to the 2012 elections. A formal announcement is expected later today. He's the third Democrat and the sixth member of the Senate to decide to step down at the end of their current terms. The others are Democratic Senators Kent Conrad of North Dakota, Jim Webb of Virginia, and Republicans Kay Bailey Hutchison of Texas, John Kyle of Arizona, and Independent Senator Joe Lieberman of Connecticut.
Vote, the yeas are 243, the nays are 185. This amendment is adopted. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on amendment number 524, printed in the congressional record, offered by the gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, on which proceedings were further postponed and on which the nays prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 524, printed in the congressional record offered by Mr. Nadler of New York.
Recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote shall rise and be counted. A sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
Members now voting on the amendment from Congressman Nadler of New York, which would prohibit funds to make a FISA application for an order requiring the production of library circulation records, library patron lists, book sales records, or customers lists. This is related to the Patriot Act, which was passed earlier this week in the House. From the Associated Press this afternoon, the House has voted, as we saw, to let the Pentagon continue using taxpayer dollars to sponsor NASCAR race teams. The vote was 281 to 148. Lawmakers rejecting an effort by Minnesota Democratic Congresswoman Betty McCollum that would have ended the practice. The Navy and Marine Corps dropped their NASCAR sponsorships in recent years, saying they didn't know whether they worked. Most Democrats did back her efforts, while Republicans voted overwhelmingly against it.
On this vote, the yeas are 196, the nays are 231. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on amendment number 466 printed in the congressional record offered by the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Poe, on which further proceedings were postponed, on which the nays prevailed by a voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 466, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. Poe of Texas.
Recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of a request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will cast their votes by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
Voting continues as Republicans and Democrats debating the $61 billion that Republicans want to remove from the 2011 federal budget. The budget is $1.2 trillion, and it funds the Pentagon, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the operating budgets of every cabinet agency. Members now voting on the Poe Amendment, prohibiting funds from being used by the EPA to implement and enforce any requirements or issue any permits for stationary source emissions of pollutants.
Vote. The yeas are 249. The nays are 175. This amendment is adopted.
Ms. Waters votes no. Mr. Sherman. Mr. Sherman votes no.
Vote, the yeas are 249, the nays are 177. This amendment is agreed to. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on amendment number 575, printed in the congressional record, offered by the gentleman from Montana, Mr. Rehberg, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 575, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. Rehberg of Montana.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
Well, a number of amendments at the beginning of the session today were directed toward trying to defund the health care law. Congressman Rehberg of Montana was the first to debate, and his amendment was debated for at least 60 minutes. They were followed by amendments by Congressman King of Iowa, 10 minutes each on those, and there were several more. So this is the first of one of those amendments that would defund the nation's health care law. Ayes are 239, the nays are 187. This amendment is adopted. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on amendment number 267, printed in the congressional record, offered by the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. King, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the ayes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 267, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. King of Iowa.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
So the House votes to approve an amendment by Congressman Rehberg to prohibit funds from being used to implement any provision of the health care law. This is the second now, moving into the second of a series of 4 amendments to defund health care. This is an amendment brought by Congressman King of Iowa that would prohibit funds from being used to implement any provisions of the health care law.
ayes are 241, the nays are 187. The amendment is adopted. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on amendment number 268, printed in the congressional record, offered by the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. King, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the ayes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 268, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. King of Iowa.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote rise and be counted. A sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
This would be the third in a series of those 4 amendments attempting to defund health care. It's an amendment brought by Congressman King of Iowa. It would prohibit any funds from being used to pay the salary of employees of any federal department or agency with respect to implementing any provision of the health care law.
Yeas are 237. The nays are 191. This amendment is adopted. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on amendment number 83, printed in the congressional record, offered by the gentlewoman from Missouri, Mrs. Emerson, on which further proceedings were postponed, on which the ayes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 83, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mrs. Emerson of Missouri.
Recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. Sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
So 3 of 4 votes to defund health care have passed so far. This is the 4th. It's brought by Congresswoman Emerson of Missouri. It would prohibit funds from being used for enforcement of the individual mandate as 2-minute voting continues on the floor of the House.
On this vote, the yeas are 246, the nays are 182. The amendment is adopted. The unfinished business is a request for recorded vote on the amendment number 89, printed in the congressional record, offered by the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Kind, in which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 89, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. Kind of Wisconsin.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
So House Republicans have voted overwhelmingly to cut funding from the health care law. Of course, this bill will still have to head to the Senate, where Majority Leader Reid has said it may not pass. The President has vowed to veto this bill. We see the President actually on C-SPAN 2. He's about to make remarks on education and jobs and the economy at Intel Corporation in Oregon. He may make remarks also on the progress of federal spending in the House this afternoon.
On this vote, the yeas are 183, the nays are 246. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is the request for recorded vote on amendment number 88, printed in the congressional record, offered by the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Kind, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by a voice vote. Clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 88, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. Kind, Wisconsin.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote shall rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
Members have now moved on to an amendment that would take away funding for the military's expeditionary fighting vehicle. Defense Secretary Robert Gates has already this week announced his opposition to deployment of the vehicle in budget talks on Capitol Hill.
On this vote, the yeas are 123, the nays are 306. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is a request for recorded vote on amendment number 104, printed in the congressional record, offered by the gentlewoman from Tennessee, Ms. Blackburn, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 104, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mrs. Blackburn of Tennessee.
Recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of request for recorded vote shall rise and be counted. A sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 2-minute vote.
So this is the last in this series, the last of 14 amendments, and it is the Blackburn amendment that would cut an additional $22 billion on top of the $100 billion in cuts to the continuing resolution, reducing legislative branch appropriations by an additional 11%, reducing all other appropriations by 5.5%. After this, more debate on amendments, and as we heard Majority Leader Cantor say, hope that they would finish up by later today. President Obama is on the West Coast today. He's making remarks on the importance of out-educating our competitors in order to win the future. He's at Intel Corporation in Hillsboro, Oregon. You can see live coverage of the president on C-SPAN 2.
Vote, the yeas are 147, the nays are 281. The amendment is not adopted. Now what do we do? Shall I call the House to order? Committee will be in order. For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington rise?
I move to strike the requisite number of words.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Can I have everybody's attention, please? Can we have everybody's attention?
Committee will be in order.
Can we have everybody's attention, please?
Will be in order. Members will take their conversations from the floor. Gentleman from Washington, he's recognized for 5 minutes.
Today may well be the last day of a very distinguished career of Congresswoman Jane Harman from California. And I want to recognize Jane in the well, and you can say a few words, and then we'll have some other people make a brief comment. Jane.
Thank you, Norm Dix, my longest standing, certainly not my oldest, friend in the House. And thank you, colleagues. My congressional career will close on February 28th, so that the constitutionally required special election to replace me can coincide with a statewide referendum Governor Brown intends to hold in California later this year. This timing will save taxpayer money, a very good thing, assure a higher turnout, and most quickly fill the vacancy created by my resignation. The messages that have flooded my offices since I announced my departure have touched me deeply. The extraordinary honor of a congratulatory statement by the President was completely unexpected and absolutely thrilling. But the message I may treasure most came from one of my 4 children. It said simply, "Brave Mama." For 17 years, I have worked my heart out for the people of California's 36th congressional district. I cast votes with which some strongly disagreed, but I have always tried my best to listen and lead. The opportunity awaiting me at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars is enormous, following the footsteps of our former member, Lee Hamilton. It is truly a center of excellence and a place where I believe I can add real value to bipartisan scholarship and policymaking. But nothing, and I mean nothing, will ever replace the 2-decade-long journey I have just completed as I sought and won a seat in Congress, my first and only elected office. I have worked closely with many of you in committees and caucuses like the Blue Dogs and the New Democrats, and on legislation. With some here, I have visited garden spots like North Korea, Libya, Syria, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Yemen to assess the threats we face. And those threats, as you all know, are extremely serious. Such foreign travel is, I believe, a wonderful way to build personal bipartisan friendships, something dearly needed here. As a lifelong, passionate, bipartisan in my bones Democrat, I have been criticized by both sides. But the center is where, in my view, most Americans are. and where, in many cases, the best policy answers are. I will bring that perspective with me to my new post at the Wilson Center. Let me make two final points. First, over the years, I have worked hard to hire and train the best staff on the planet. We call ourselves Team Harmon.
Out in order.
Gentleman's correct.
And at annual reunions, I marvel at how they and their families have grown. I truly love them and know how their extraordinary efforts are appreciated by my constituents and by other offices. And second, I always say that I represent the smartest constituents on earth. This is not a joke. They have helped me enormously to do my job well. Sydney, my young Sydney, and I and our ever-growing family thank them for the milestones and the memories. I may be changing my day job, but not my residence or my heart. So, as I conclude my final statement on the floor of this House, I depart with great affection and gratitude to wonderful colleagues, to very long-standing friends, to a leadership with whom I have worked closely, to my sisters from California and throughout the United States, on both sides of the aisle. All of you have become valued, 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 very valued friends, and I thank you again for the honor of serving with
I
you.
yield to the Democratic leader. I'll get unanimous consent if I have to.
To our valued friend, Jane Harmon, to a proud Californian, to a great leader in our country, I know I speak for everyone in this Congress on this occasion when I say we have been proud to call you colleague, and again, for many of us, to value you as a friend. Jane Harmon's contribution to our country is one as a patriot, not only for her great service in the Congress of the United States, but she and her family, her young Sydney, have been a source of strength to our country, whether it comes to security, our national security, the arts, the education of the next generation. We all know that our first responsibility is to keep the American people safe. No one has done more in that regard than Jane Harmon, and also in conveying the values of our great nation throughout the world. The Woodrow Wilson Center is fortunate indeed to have her leadership. It will be a great combination. And so I say, Jane, we all choke up when we hear you say it's your last statement on the floor. We've all benefited from your wisdom. We congratulate you and send you off with great love. Brave Mama. Please do yield back the time.
I now yield to the Democratic whip, Mr. Hoyer from Maryland.
I thank the gentleman from Washington State for yielding, and I thank the leader for her remarks. Jane Harmon and I have known each other for almost half a century. We, in effect, grew up together in many ways, became involved in public service, and I've seen her grow into one of the great leaders in this country on issues of national security. National security is one of the most bipartisan issues with which we deal. Everyone knows that we swear an oath to defend the Constitution and laws of this nation, and that we have a responsibility to ensure the safety of our country and the safety of our people. Few among us have taken more to heart that responsibility than Jane Harmon of California. Jane, of course, as all of you know, served on the Intelligence Committee. She served on the Intelligence Committee as ranking member for a long period of time. And if you ask the people in the intelligence community or in the defense community, and of course she served on the staff of the Department of Defense as well, in a number of administrations. They will tell you that Jane Harman is as knowledgeable, as incisive, as thoughtful, as analytical as anybody with whom they have dealt in the Congress of the United States. We will be a lesser Congress for her leaving us and have less of an expertise, although many experts we still have. Jane has been a voice to the American people on the focus that we have needed to keep our country safe and to confront those terrorists who would put us at risk. Jane, we owe you a debt of gratitude. Your constituents owe you a debt of gratitude, and your country owes you a debt of gratitude. The sadness of your leaving is leavened somewhat by the fact that you will continue to be involved and your expertise will continue to be available in your new position as the leader of the Woodrow Wilson Center, a distinguished center of thought and focus on issues of international security and policy. We thank you for your service. We wish you the very best, and we are so glad to know that you're just a few blocks down the road so that we will be able to call upon you to give your very thoughtful insights, analysis, and advice to the issues that confront this nation and all of us, Democrats and Republicans, liberals and conservatives, which, as you rightly point out, is not an issue of ideology but of practical safety for our citizens and nation. Thank you, dear friend. Thank you, dear colleague. Thank you, dear American leader. I yield back the balance of my time.
I yield to the gentleman from California, our former chairman of the Appropriations Committee, Defense Subcommittee, Mr. Lewis, our good friend.
Thank you. As Arlene and I were sharing thoughts about you, dear Jane, she expressed some consternation that she had not been able to find a young Sid. But nonetheless, she suggested she was going to put up with me anyway. Jane, we have admired your work for all of my life in public affairs since I've been in the Congress. You've become a wonderful friend as well as a policy partner. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed our years together on the Intelligence Committee. Our work on behalf of our national security together, hand in hand, has been very important to Arlene and myself. You're a wonderful person, a wonderful personality, and we love you and wish you well as you go forward, Jane.
I've known Jane for 42 years. She was a staff assistant to Senator Tunney when I was a staff assistant to Senator Magnuson. We've worked together as colleagues ever since. We love Sydney. We are so excited that there still is a Woodrow Wilson Center for you to go to. And we appreciate your great service to our country and thank you for everything that you've done. Yes, I do yield to my friend.
I thank my friend for yielding, and I know that we have lots of work to do here, and we've gone through an extraordinary process over the last few days, but rush downstairs to say that when I think of Jane Harman, I think of the quintessential individual committed to bipartisanship. She has always worked to reach across the aisle, whether it's dealing with national security and foreign policy issues or domestic issues, or for us issues as we share the representation of the Los Angeles area. And I want to say that the Woodrow Wilson Center is going to be, we all respected Lee Hamilton, but an even greater place now with Jane Harman there, and I thank my friend for yielding.
Yeah, thank you. And Jane, we wish you well at the Woodrow Wilson Center. Lee Hamilton did a fantastic job. We know you will too. And again, and I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. In order. I hate to kick her out of it. Committee will be in order. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York rise?
Madam Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment. Could the gentleman specify the number on your amendment, please?
I'm sorry?
Could you specify the number on
It's
your amendment?
number 336.